In this one prompt, I've asked it to do 3 different things. What's also important about this prompt that we're about to execute is that all of these things I'm asking it to do are ultimately on other third-party services, right? We're going to talk to Gmail, we're going to talk to Slack, we're going to talk to GitHub. And that itself is pretty difficult for agents. But most importantly, all of these services are secured. You can't access someone's Gmail unless you've authenticated as them. And similarly for Slack. So all of this is happening on behalf of me. People are learning the hard way that APIs don't work with large language model very well. You can't just hand a large language model an API definition and have it go figure it out. It might, but the error rates, hallucinations, it won't work with enough confidence to make it valuable.
Our sponsor for this episode is Extreme Networks, the company radically improving customer experiences with AI-powered automation for networking. Extreme is driving the convergence of AI, networking, and security to transform the way businesses connect and protect their networks to deliver faster performance, stronger security, and a seamless user experience. Visit extremenetworks.com to learn more. That's Extreme Networks, all run together.com to learn more.
So, hi, I'm Alex Salazar. I'm the founder CEO of Arcade.dev. And at a high level, we make it possible for AI agents and large language model based applications to perform actions and connect to other systems and other services securely. And to put it in a very relatable way, most of us have used ChatGPT to draft an email, but you can't send the email from ChatGPT. And that's because ChatGPT's agent can't properly connect to Gmail and authenticate as you in order to send the email or read the emails and vice versa. So we help solve that. Prior to starting the company, I did a brief stint in venture capital at a deep tech venture firm called NeoTribe. That's where I ran into the problem. I was mostly focused on AI infrastructure and started to see where the challenges were in AI. And as a former founder sitting in venture capital, I couldn't help but get the itch and go start the company that I wanted instead of funding it. Prior to that, I was VP of product for Okta for their developer products and general manager for all their new products. And prior to that, I was a CEO co-founder of a company called Stormpath, which was an API for developers to implement authentication, login, password reset in their applications. And Okta acquired that business as part of its developer-facing customer identity business. So my background is heavily in authentication, authorization, developer products, and helping organizations change how they do business with their customers through software. And then a computer science degree from Georgia Tech and an MBA from Stanford University.
Okay. And the Arcade.dev is, how would you describe it? It's a platform for building agents?
Correct. So our customers are developers, people trying to build agents themselves. So typically organizations or all the way down to hobbyists who are trying to build something fun for themselves. But it's our customers are building the agents, and then we're giving them the ability to connect those agents securely to other services like Gmail and Slack and Twitter and Salesforce.com and anything that might be custom and internal to their organization.
And I think we began talking at some point about, and this may have been the way that we met, I don't remember, about a model context protocol developed by Anthropic. And I know you guys have done some work with Anthropic on developing that protocol. And I was just at a conference with IBM where they were introducing their agent communication protocol, ACP.
Yeah.
And it's all of that sounds like it would fit in the Arcade.dev dev platform. So yeah, can you talk through how a developer would use Arcade, and whether IBM's
Yeah.
ACP and Anthropic's MCP are the dominant protocols, or whether there are a bunch of them? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll start with the protocols. There is an exploding number of protocols
Yeah.
right now, but they're all in their infancy. It is like the very beginning of the first inning, and so I would say MCP is the one that's most talked about. Um, and it has gained tremendous popularity because some of the coding agents that developers use to write software, the most popular one being Cursor, adopted MCP, and that really exploded its popularity with developers. When people are building agents, there's a lot of promise with these protocols. There's a lot of promise with MCP. In fact, we're pretty heavily involved with Anthropic in helping to evolve MCP properly, specifically around authentication authorization. But it's still very early. But the protocols are really about helping everybody agree on on how an agent and another service are gonna talk to each other. That just like that language between the two. So we, as a platform that helps developers build this and automate these connections and properly handle the authentication and authorization and the retry logic and all that, we're ultimately protocol agnostic. We believe in MCP and we're investing heavily in MCP, but I don't think that developers ultimately care at that level. What they really care about is they wanted to make sure it all works.
Yeah.
And so that's where we put all of our energy, is just making sure developers are able to check the box, deliver the product they want to deliver, and we'll give it to them in the best way we can.
And yeah, so let's go to the platform, and you can introduce the platform and what it does. And I'm guessing with these protocols, is there a drop down menu and you pick the protocol? Or I mean, how does that
Yeah,
work?
yeah, it's a great question. So I'll give a quick demo, and for people listening, I'll walk you through it, and we can all experience it in the theater of the mind. All right. So what I'm showing here is not actually our product. It's what we refer to as a sample application, and this
Yep.
is an example of what a developer could build using our product and the kinds of features that they could deliver. And so, for the people who can't see the screen, this looks very much like a Chat GPT type interface.
Yep.
It looks like a chatbot. And so one of the big differences is at the very bottom, you're going to see this little drop down that says toolkits. This is our terminology for all the connectors and plugins to other services that you might have in your agent. And so we've set up 5 toolkits here. We've got GitHub, Google Workspace, so like things like Gmail, LinkedIn, Notion, and Slack. And what and each of those toolkits themselves are going to have a set of what people in AI refer to as tools. So each of them will have, let's call it like on average about 10 tools. The tools themselves are the actions. And so if it said, hey, read my email, reading an email is an action. Reply to the email, that's another action. Send the email is another action. And so each of these tools have at least 10. The Google one's actually pretty beefy. That one has a lot more than 10. Um, and uh, and so that's going to dictate what the agent can do. So let me show you a use case. So we're going to say, read the general channel on Slack, pull the latest activity on the Arcade AI GitHub repo, and send a summary of it all to Alex at Arcade.dev. So what I've written but not yet submitted is what's called a multi-turn prompt. And
Yep.
so in ChatGPT, you'll typically say, "Hey, write me a poem," and that's one turn. But if you say, "Hey, write me an email," and then summarize it, and then this other thing, the LLM, the agent that using the LLM, will have to take multiple turns to achieve what you want. And so in this one prompt, I've asked it to do three different things.
Hmm.
What's also important about this prompt that we're about to execute is that all of these, all of these things I'm asking it to do are ultimately on other third-party services, right? We're going to talk to Gmail, we're going to talk to Slack, we're going to talk to GitHub, and that itself is pretty difficult for agents. But most importantly, all of these services are secured. You can't access someone's Gmail unless you've authenticated as them. And similarly for Slack. So all of this is happening on behalf of me. This is end user based authentication and authorization, which I haven't seen many examples of in the world today. So for many people, this is the first time they'll ever see something like that. So we're going to hit enter and we're going to pray to the demo gods that it works. Live demos are always tricky. And so what's happening is we sent the prompt to the large language model. And this is an off the shelf large language model. We're using GPT-4o. And along with the prompt, under the hood, we sent it a collection of like a multiple choice question
Hmm.
of all these different tools available to it. And we sent about 50, which is a very large number. Most engineering teams can't get past 10 without the LLM hallucinating. We're able to get to about 80 or 100. So we sent about 50 in this scenario. And think of it like a calculator. If somebody asks you to multiply two really large numbers, you're probably not going to get it right. But if I hand you a calculator, you're going to get it right. And so what we've done here is all of these tools are like calculator buttons. So instead of the large language model trying to figure out what it even means to look up something in Slack, um, it knows to hit the button that it hit here, which is the Slack get message in channel by name tool. And then it also went and hit the GitHub list repository activities tool.
Yep.
And that's all it had to do. And then it passes us the arguments. So it needs to know, hey, channel by name, which channel? Based on the prompt, it's guessing the general channel. Hey, on GitHub, which repository? Based on the prompt, it's hitting the Arcade-AI repo. And then we execute all of that logic for the agent. Now, when we go receive that request to go execute those tools, the very first thing that happens in Arcade is we check to see, does this tool require authentication and authorization?
Hmm.
And in both cases, the answer is yes. And so then we say, okay, great. Is that user for whom the agent's acting on behalf of, has it already authenticated and authorized the agent to perform these actions? And if the answer is yes, we proceed. If the answer is no, then we pop up a login screen and the developer goes through what's called an OAuth flow, which almost all of us have experienced on the internet, where you go to the Google's website and there's a screen telling you, hey, do you want to allow this other application all these rights to your system, yes or no, and you hit approve. We handle all of that for the developer, and then once the user does that, it sends the alert back to the agent, and the agent proceeds with the requests, which is
Yep.
what's happening here. And then, so that's how the service works.
Yeah, let me just go back a little bit. So, when you make the initial request, the platform is like an orchestrator. It knows what tools it has access to, and rather than, as I've seen with many platforms, you deciding which tool you need to use for this workflow, it'll automatically make that decision for you, and then it's just a question of whether it has authorization, whether the platform has already gone for it through authorization, for example, to access your Gmail.
Correct.
One thing, a lot of these tools or services require an API key. Is that what you're referring to on the authorization step, or is that a different step
Yeah.
that the people have to go through?
No, it's a great question, and actually speaks to the complexity of what has to get built. So, if you think of how security works at a really high level, there's a resource. Let's think your email is the resource, and then there's the subject, the person trying to access the email. And
Yep.
so, in most scenarios, as humans, it's a very simple process. We show up. There's a login screen. We type in our information, and then we're in. And then there's permissions inside the system saying what do we have access to, which is in our Gmail, we have access to all of it. But if we're trying to access the finance system at our organization, we probably have very limited access.
Yeah.
Very simple use case. There's also the concept of machine identity, which is not new. This has been around forever. And so, you might give an API key to another service, another piece of software, and then that service can go authenticate in its way, very similar way, to another service like a finance system, and might be able to pull information. And once it authenticates, it itself has all kinds of permissions that it accesses. But this is different. And so the number of use cases where an AI agent can and should access something as itself and purely as itself, what we call a service account, are pretty limited. It's the Google Search API, it's a weather API. It's typically things that aren't terribly secure. You don't worry a ton about them getting broken into. But the vast majority of where end users get value from an agent require the agent to go access something that is tied to the user.
Yeah.
You want to access your email, it's tied to you. You want to access financial information at your organization, it's going to be tied to who's reading it. The CEO is going to have very different level of access than the intern. And so when you do that, the naive approach is to have the agent simply get the user credentials and just authenticate as the end user to those services. That's wildly insecure. And more importantly, it's unsafe from an AI perspective. So let's use an email example. Your inbox, you can do whatever you want. You can delete all the emails if you wanted to. Do you want to give the agent the ability to delete email?
Yeah.
Right? No, because it might hallucinate and accidentally delete your email. There's a very famous coding agent called Cursor that I use actively.
Sure.
It once hallucinated and tried to delete my root directory.
Wow.
Right. For those people who aren't engineers, deleting your root directory is the equivalent of deleting your entire computer. Now, thankfully, my Mac operating system has a bunch of authorization already built in. And so even if I had said yes, it wouldn't have been able to do it. Thank God. But you don't want to, even though you, Craig, have full access to your email, you don't want to give the agent that same level of access. And so the right approach is to give the agent an intersection of permissions, an intersection of what you, Craig, have access to, but also an intersection of what the developer and Craig have granted the agent access to. And that, thankfully, there's protocols for that. There's a very popular protocol called OAuth, but it's very difficult for developers to implement. And until recently, almost impossible for them to implement in the context of agents. And that's what we've solved.
I see. And in that case, let's go back to the API issue, because LLMs don't handle APIs very well. What happens when you need to hit a service or
yeah, that's a great question. So I think this is the thing that a lot of people are learning. I mean, the AI industry is very new, right? ChatGPT and GPT 3.5, had their second year anniversary this last November, right?
Right.
And so it's mind-boggling to really internalize how fast this all happened. And so as people are trying to build agents that can take actions, that can do things and not just generate content, people are learning the hard way that APIs don't work with large language model very well. You can't just hand a large language model an API definition and have it go figure it out. It might, but the error rates with people, hallucinations, will make it just not very, like, it won't work with enough confidence to make it valuable. And so what people do instead, the right way to give an agent access to other services, is to build what's called a tool. Terrible name, SEOs terribly, but it's the terminology everyone in AI uses. And a tool is like an action. It's an intent based action that might wrap one or multiple APIs to perform that action. And so I'll give you a really simple example. Reply to an email. If you're in an agent that's email based and you say, hey, reply to my email from Craig, there is no API endpoint on the Gmail API to respond to an email. There is lookup email and there is send email. And so a reply to Craig, when I say reply to Craig's email, the tool it needs is going to be reply to email tool. That tool is going to do multiple things. The first thing it's going to do is it's going to go find the email I'm referencing that I want it to reply to. So that's already one API call. Once it retrieves that email, it then has to unpack the email structure. It's called MIME. You have to unpack this email structure. It's actually a fairly complex piece of software.
Yep.
There's attachments, there's HTML versions and full text versions, etc. Unpacks all of that. Then has to go generate the response, insert the response, then repackage it all up again in that email structure called MIME, and then hit the send email endpoint. Altogether, it's about 100 or 200 lines of code, depending on how diligent you're being. And that's not even including all of the error handling and checks to make sure it's all working and safe. That's a lot of work. That's a distinction between an API and a tool. Now you go something much more complicated, like, hey, DoorDash, order me a pizza. The order me food tool for DoorDash would be like 10 API calls. So there's just a different level of complexity, but most importantly, it's presented to the large language model very differently. If you've ever looked at an API, it looks like gibberish. It looks like a URL. AI systems don't understand that. So a large language model, when the tool's presented to it, it's presented in natural language English.
Mm-hmm.
This is a tool for replying to an email by a sender. It takes in the name of the sender, the subject line, the body of the new response, and it's all explained in English. And that's what makes a large language model really good at selecting the right tool and then selecting the right input arguments for it to go execute.
Okay, and the this all takes place internally. I mean, is that the chief? Because there are a lot of platforms out there now to build agents. Differentiator with Arcade that it handles this authorization in the background, so you don't have to.
Yeah. So So the way to describe where we fit. So we are not a large language model company.
Yeah.
There are very good large language model companies out there, Anthropic and OpenAI being the most notable. And so the large language model is the one that selects the tools. We've designed Arcade to be the system that receives the selection and then executes the tool. And so what we're really good at a really high level is helping developers get that tool execution to be so good that they can get their agent from a demo to production. And so anything that requires that, we've put a lot of IP into. The very biggest problem everybody runs into is that end user authentication and authorization. And so that is the backbone of our feature set. But there are other things that are also critical, but they're a bit in the weeds, like parallel tool calling, retriable tool logic. So that demo I gave you, it works remarkably consistently. which in AI, that is the performance metric in AI. It's
Yeah.
not how fast it is, it's how often does it error out. That demo I gave you, I've given that demo like 100 times. I don't think I've ever seen it error out. And it's not because the large language model is not hallucinating. It is. It's hallucinating just like every other system out there. But part of our IP is that we can catch those errors and then have the large language model retry with additional context. And when you do that, the consistency rates go through the roof. And so all of that nitty gritty detail that helps a developer take an agent from from demo to production, that's where we focus our efforts.
Yeah, and this is a developer's platform. Why not make it a B2C product for uh, general users?
Yeah, it's a great question. To know thyself, right? My team and I, we're just passionate about infrastructure. Yes, I always give a house analogy. I'm trying to give you the best pipes in the industry. I want you to build a beautiful house, right? I just happen to be really passionate about pipes.
And yeah, but that doesn't explain why not let
Yeah. Well,
mom and
yeah, I
pop
think because
build their own.
I think from a consumer side, why not let consumers use the service to build
Yeah,
their own agents?
yeah,
Oh, okay, that's different. Yeah. So the answer I was giving is why didn't we just build an application? Like, why didn't we compete with ChatGPT?
right, right. Oh, I
And I think,
understand that.
yeah. So there we want to be picks and shovels. Why do we not expose our picks and shovels to the average consumer? Um, there, people call this like no code or low code agent builders. Um, that's not a space. One, we don't know that space particularly well, so there is a bit of like a domain mismatch. But second, I, if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm just not a big believer um, in those
Yeah,
um, because it's the building an agent's extraordinarily complicated, and we really want to have a big impact on what everybody in the world, what the world of AI and agents looks like, and I think that the biggest impact we could have would be giving it to the developers because they're the ones who we believe they're the ones who are going to build the most powerful agents of tomorrow. And so that's where we focused.
yeah. And so on the platform, once you've built an agent, uh, is it deployed or how is it moved into a production
Yeah.
product?
Yeah. So the kind of the life cycle of an agent developer is they start to build something and they get it working in demo and everybody gets wowed. I'm sure you've seen a lot of agents wow you in a demo, and then
Yeah,
they never quite make it to production. It's actually one of the biggest problems right now in agents. Is I think like the stat I heard somewhere is less than 30% of agents ever make their way to production because it's so hard. The demos are easy, and so what happens next is they show it to everybody, they get approval to go really invest in it, and then they start to build. And they start running into a bunch of problems. The biggest problem they run into the first one they run into is authentication and authorization because they simply can't deliver a feature. Let's say they get past that. The next problem they run into is consistency and accuracy, right? Notoriously, agents and AI hallucinate. And if those hallucination rates are below 80%, it's not going to be a valuable agent. People aren't going to use it. And so a lot of things fail over that. Now, if you clear that hurdle, the next thing you're going to run into is a cost issue. Um, you know, OpenAI and Anthropic, they cost money. Every
yeah,
time you call them, you're paying for each token, and that stuff can really add up at scale. So a lot of teams that we talk to who don't go to production yet, somebody did math and realized, oh, if we implement this, it's gonna bankrupt us. And so then there's some reengineering of how do we implement this with fewer large language model calls. Now, if you're using us, we unblock the first two. The third one is fortunately out of our hands. And so to deploy us, it's very easy. The developer gets an API key from us, drops it into their software, and when they're implementing their logic, they're just calling out to us for what's called the tool calls. and then we handle everything else behind the scenes. So we've offloaded a lot of the logic so that they just have to drop an API key. And that's typically it for them in most use cases. If a developer wants to build their own integration, they want to author their own tool, we have a whole SDK for them to do that and leverage all the same value and benefits. And how they deploy that custom tool really depends on what they want to do. They can deploy it in their own infrastructure, their own servers, or they can deploy it to us and then we'll put it on a cloud server and run it for them. But that's really all that's needed.
Yeah. And then does it create uh, a web app for the tool that then the developer can disseminate within their organization? Or uh, how? So I'm a developer at a large organization. I create this agent to help people manage their emails, read and send, and all of that.
Yeah.
That the actual logic sits in the cloud with Arcade. I hit it with an API, but what's the interface that then?
Hey, that's a great question. So this is an important distinction. So the agent itself, let's call it the app, because an agent is just an application. The difference is that it's leveraging large language models for the workflows. So instead of a developer somewhere saying, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3 in this order, there's a large language model in there, and the large language model is deciding what the next step in the workflows are. Whether it's a consumer-facing, writing app or a CRM or a finance app.
Mm-hmm.
That's the distinction. That app we don't touch. That app's deployed and written in whatever way the developers want. So maybe it's deploying to AWS or to Microsoft Azure. But when it goes to take an action that talks to another service, like an integration, at that point that app calls out to us.
Right.
And for most of our customers, we are used as a cloud service ourselves. But for our larger customers, they can deploy us in their own private clouds, their own, their own private Azures and AWS environments.
Yeah, and this platform, you say you're not a model company, then you can choose the model based on whatever. Whether it's price or latency or whatever. I was just up to see IBM's rollout of Granite 4, and they're building these small models that are much cheaper.
Yeah.
And for something like reading and responding to an email, you don't need a behemoth like 4.0. Do you have smaller models like that?
Yeah. So for us, in the demo I gave you, that demo it uses GPT-4o, but that's really just for the demo. For our customers, they can bring whatever models they want.
Right.
Now, that being said, when it comes to tool calling, the ability for a large language model to decide and select that right calculator button to hit and what the input arguments are to the calculator button, today there are very few models that can do tool selection or what's called tool calling or function calling.
Right.
Today that I know of, I think it's just OpenAI, GPT 3.5 Turbo and up, Claude. I know that Meta's Llama, the most recent Llama release, now supports tool calling, and I think Grok. So the population of the ones that can actually integrate the tools is still pretty small. That's going to change quickly, but yes, we're believers that there are going to be a proliferation of smaller models for more specific tasks, more narrow tasks, but they're not yet tool calling capable.
I see.
But they'll come.
Yeah. And in this, how do you price Arcade? Is it a subscription by seat or pay-as-you-go usage model?
Yeah. It, it is primarily a usage-based model. That's what developers love. Pay as you go. We do have subscriptions, but they're really just proxies for usage-based pricing to make it simpler. And so we charge on two metrics.
Mhm.
We charge on monthly active users that we're authenticating and authorizing, because the identity component of the product is very important. And then separately, we charge on what we call request volume. Right? How often are you calling out to our service to perform an action? Both of those metrics uh, we see as metrics of the value that someone is getting from our service.
Yeah. And how, I mean, this is all moving so fast. And as I said, there are a lot of these platforms for building agents. Two questions: how do other platforms handle this authentication issue,
Yeah,
um, and how do you uh, compete with the likes of IBM, who has a agent building platform, or AWS, or who, all these people are coming
yeah,
out with agent building platforms. Yeah.
yeah. So for the smart agent building platforms like Relevance AI, they use us, right? We are the connectors. Um, if you look at one of the more popular ones, is N8N, a very robust community. Um, if you look at how the connections work, they don't do this, right? You have to kind of really do abnormal things to connect to Google Drive, for example. And it really only work for one user because it's using that particular user's credentials hard coded in to the agent. So that's the state of the art today. And so for anyone building an agent builder, we make all of this very easy and very secure without them having to go spend a year of engineering time trying to figure out how to make it work. Half our team is out of Okta. We nailed the auth piece.
Yeah.
um, we don't compete with auth builders, and so because our target demographic, the software developers, they're not really using agent builders, right? What they're writing the agents themselves in code because they need that bespoke fidelity of how it's going to work. Morgan Stanley's not using an agent builder, right? And so we partner very closely with what they're most likely using, which are called orchestration systems. So like a Lang chain is a really good
Yeah.
example. So there we partner very closely with them. They handle the orchestration and we handle the tool calling.
Yeah, that's interesting. And where do you see this going? I mean, uh, people are now talking about these networks. Microsoft calls it a society of agents, or societies of agents, that'll be operating alongside human workers. I mean, how do you see that developing, and do you see that in your usage metrics?
Yeah.
That
You
yeah.
know, I'm a very big believer in agents. I'm an agent maximalist, if you will. But I do think that I think sometimes the PR gets a little too far out from some of the reality. So here's what I believe. I believe that what's happening with agents is very similar to what happened with the internet in '94, right?
Yeah.
Um, OpenAI and Anthropic are the Netscape navigator of this moment. And they like unlocked all of this innovation. And so now we're seeing it all happening in real time. It's happening very, very, I think by all metrics, happening about twice as fast and twice as big as the internet boom. But, and so I think it's going to radically change our lives in every way, right? I look at my kids already. My 14-year-old daughter gets upset when she sees me typing,
Yeah.
calls me a dinosaur, yanks the phone from my hands, hits the dictate button and talks to the phone.
Yeah.
I use my Android and I won't let go of it because the AI assistant is so far superior to Siri and only going to get better once the Gemini models officially hit the assistant level. And so I no longer interact with my phone, as much with my thumbs, right? I talk to it. And so all of like that natural language interface is super powerful because it captures intent. The
Yeah.
best business in history was Google, and it had one input box. The entire business model was one input box, and it was so powerful because it captured user intent. If you go look at something like Salesforce.com, man, you've got to go through 3 months of software of training just to use the damn thing because it's so
Yeah.
complicated. All of that's going to go away when you can just say, "Hey, give me the latest user record from my meeting with Craig." Nope, that's where all this stuff is going. I believe, but I don't. I personally bristle when people personify agents because I think in 5 years the conversation is going to be really boring. Like it's going to be so powerful and so valuable, but it's also going to look really boring in hindsight, just like the internet looks boring in hindsight today.
Yeah.
What it's going to feel like is really good workflow automation.
Yeah. And the people building with Arcade, are they primarily building agents for use within an organization, or are there people building agents uh, for sale to consumers? You want an agent to read your and respond to your emails. I mean, yeah, you could go
Yeah,
on Zapier and go through some
yeah,
supposedly simple steps that are not as simple as they sound like they're going to be, or you could just pay a few bucks, download this agent.
yeah. We see all kinds. We see everything. Um, and I'll give you a few examples. So, one of our customers is this great product. Everyone should use it. I use it, called Shortwave. And they are building an email agent. And so, it'll help you organize your inbox. It'll help clear out stuff you don't need to respond to. It'll help do unsubscriptions. It'll help you auto reply to things you don't have to type as much. It's great. I love it.
It's
They're
called
using
shortwave.
yeah, like shortwave radio,
Oh,
shortwave.
yeah, I'll look it
Uh,
up.
yeah, totally look it up. And big fan. They use us to expand capabilities. And so, as you reply to an email, for example, you might want to pull context from the CRM or from a Notion document or your Drive. And so we make that easier and more possible for them. We have an agent builder, Relevance AI. They're using us to extend their agent building capabilities so
Hmm.
that it can all be secure and very consistent and reliable. There's a large financial services organization that's using us for internal productivity. So they're building a Slack bot that it integrates to all of the messaging and productivity systems that any individual employee would have. Sneak, which is a big security company, they're using us for a social media app that they built. They started off in one team. It was so successful, they're now rolling it out like wall to wall in the organization. And this social media agent connects to Twitter and LinkedIn. You give it a topic, and it will go do go prepare everything and research it and read your old posts to keep it in your style and tone, and then generate the content. So we're doing all of the integrations to the social media platforms. And then there's a very large wealth management department at one of the top, financial services banks, top Fortune 50. And they are trying to modernize the wealth management system for their clients, and they want it to be more agentic, where clients can really ask complex questions about their portfolios and make decisions and have it all connect to secure systems because it's very sensitive information. And so we see all kinds. I would say the majority of what we see are uh, technology companies building consumer or B2B facing software, um, and then financial services. I
Yeah.
think if I were to predict what's coming, I think e-commerce and retail is going to be the next domino to fall. We are part of a partnership with Visa, trying to get agentic commerce working. There's a lot of complexity there, and I think once things like that start to get released, I think we're going to see a revolution in e-commerce as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's fascinating. Um, and just going back, Sneak, this social media management agent, is that going to be available to consumers, or that's for their internal use?
Yeah, so they build it for themselves, so they use it for internal use. Their LangChain, one of our friends, they built a open source, publicly facing social media agent that also uses us, and anyone can use that. That's fully open source. It uses LangChain's LangGraph uh, agent framework and Arcade under the hood, so that can be a reference implementation for somebody who wants to do something similar.
And that's simple enough for a consumer to use, or is that for companies?
I think that one is for developers to turn it into whatever they want to
Right,
expose. And so
right.
an intrepid developer could go package that up and release it as a consumer-facing product. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it's really designed for developers to repackage.
Yeah. Have you seen, as people are developing these agents, are there marketplaces of agents, or agent stores, as there have been for a lot of other
Yeah, there are a lot of people trying. Um, I I think what the first iteration of it's looking like are these directories of agents. There are many. Um, and I don't know that I've yet seen one where it's a marketplace where I can legitimately just like pay for things. I'm sure that's coming. I don't know who will own that category. Um, but yeah, I don't know that an app store has yet come out for agents.
yeah. And maybe it will be the app store. I mean, right. Um, and for you guys, when did you start Arcade?
We started Arcade a little over a year ago.
Okay.
And it originally started as us trying to build an agent. As trying to build an agent that could diagnose production software issues. So, your Netflix, and for whatever reason, the videos aren't loading fast enough, or the servers are crashing for some reason. And traditionally, a human has to get involved to go figure out what's going on. And we were building an agent that could go automatically do some of that work, and it was really hard. The
Yeah.
hardest part of it was we had a very hard time getting the agent to go connect to all these sensitive systems and be authorized and authenticated properly, and be really consistent in its pulls of data. And so we had to reinvent how we were building an agent, and that's ultimately what led us to the insights and the innovation that we pivoted into, which is Arcade. We ultimately took that underlying platform and turned that into its own product.
Yeah. And your work with Anthropic and was it Microsoft on MCP? Is that because you guys came out of Okta and are authentication specialists that you got involved? What was the relationship there?
Yeah. So MCP is very new as a protocol,
Yep.
and Anthropic got a lot of things right, uh, but they didn't get everything right. And so how auth is handled was one of those places that was still like something that needed a lot of work. And to Anthropic's credit, instead of just trying to muscle through it themselves, they opened it up to the community to help. They opened
Mm,
up to all the experts,
right.
and today there's a very it's a very the auth community is not terribly large, and all the experts are either from Microsoft or Okta alumni.
Yeah.
And so we have three of the best auth people from Okta on our team, and Microsoft with their Entra, formerly known as Active Directory team, are very expert in this. And so we've been involved as part of the community effort with Anthropic, and we're actually really excited as to where that protocol is going, and in particular where the auth with it is going. I think it's going to be a really nice developer experience.
Is there anything I haven't talked about that you want listeners to know?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the biggest ask, if you will, that I have of people, especially either developers themselves or leaders in organizations, is to think past a chatbot. So many people envision an agent and they think ChatGPT,
Right.
but all the biggest places where AI can really have a big impact are really around automating parts of our lives and parts of our work. And many of those use cases are going to look a lot different than what a ChatGPT like interface looks like. And once people start to realize the art of the possible, that, oh, wait a second, I can build an agent that can go, interact with this and connect to that. That there's so much power in what can happen, and so um, I hope people think bigger. And when they think bigger, I hope they think of us as well.
Yeah, and just one last thing on you build an agent, but I mean, oftentimes in a workflow, it's better to make things composable, or so you may have an agent rather than having an agent that can do 10 things, break it up, so you have 10 agents that work together. Does Arcade account for that? I mean, can you
Yes. Yeah, actually, well, man, that's like a whole podcast on its own. Concept of multi-agent systems. Yeah, we are very big believers in multi-agent systems. Our product is ultimately agnostic, but we're very big believers. And when we build agents for ourselves or sample applications, we're increasingly showing off multi-agent systems.
Our sponsor for this episode is Extreme Networks, the company radically improving customer experiences with AI powered automation for networking. Extreme is driving the convergence of AI, networking, and security to transform the way businesses connect and protect their networks to deliver faster performance, stronger security, and a seamless user experience. Visit extremenetworks.com to learn more. That's Extreme Networks, all run together.com to learn more.